Hello my friends, I am thinking I'm going to film a quick spontaneous intro to this video because what I have been trying to do over recent months is film the process of creating things as I'm creating them. Now I touched upon this in a recent video that I actually find it really difficult because when I'm sewing at my machine or designing, I get into a state of deep flow and deep work. So to stop, to get a camera, to take a new camera angle, to stop filming, to rearrange, it all just adds to the process. And when I was really struggling to selfishly sew anyway, it just made it that much easier to procrastinate. So forgive me if this isn't a really polished video, if it isn't like a how-to. That's not really what I'm intending to do here. I'm just really trying to build the habit of taking you along on the journey. And then of course, alongside this, I'm going to be bringing you even more tutorials, tips and tricks. But at the time of filming, we're actually going through the January 3-day design challenge for 2023. I'm having a whale of a time, and the tips I'm giving are all about texture, colour and silhouette and how that can influence your designs, how it can elevate them. And I just really feel like the flamingo trousers are the perfect example of this. I thought I would take you along the process. These trousers were made under the trouser framework cycle in the DPL Atelier, my high value, low cost fashion membership where we create, cut and construct our dream wardrobes, designed by you, made by you, worn by you. And because of this, I have also been improving my own personal sewing projects, sewing more for me, and it's just been really, really fun. And these flamingo trousers don't necessarily have a design element to them. All I made sure was that they fit me like a glove, and there are loads of trouser amendment tutorials in the Atelier, or if you'd like to, I do have really affordable fashion file packs that are also full of high value, bite-sized information and nuggets of wisdom to start fitting your clothes. But over the course of 3 months, my members and I were designing and making our very own trouser designs. These are really simple. They're basically a trouser block that fits me in a way I want it to. I've added a single piece button fly front, I've added front hip pockets, and I've added a shaped waistband. I actually went a little bit wrong, and this is me rushing at the machine. This is me after over a decade of experience. This is me trying to cut corners. I didn't stay stitch my waistline, and it actually stretched a little bit out of shape. So that's something I already need to amend, but I was getting too excited to wear them that I just could not wait. The entire garment is French seamed, which I just absolutely love. And the kind of fitting amendments I personally had to make from the basic trouser block were to take volume out of the inseam. I do have quite a narrow leg, so I had to definitely remove volume there. I did lower my seat by curving out the back crotch, and then after making a few more amendments had to raise it again. So there was quite a lot of back and forth, and it was actually really good for me to make these amendments because the last time I drafted a trouser block for myself, I must have been in my early to mid 20s, and your body changes, ain't that the hard truth? So I really hope that you let me know in the comments if you like this style of video, how I can improve it, if you would have preferred for it to be a little bit more of a how-to tutorial. I'm really just trying to experiment with YouTube this year and enjoy it, and then along the journey with that give you value as well. You'll see me get started with making some final pattern amendments. Now, when you draft a trouser block, as my members will know, it is not uncommon to make 5, 6, even 7 toiles and prototype garments. Fitting trousers is notoriously technical. If you think about fitting a skirt, that is a tube of fabric that basically has to fit your waist and hips and then is just suspended, whereas a trouser has to fit your waist and hips, your crotch curve, which if you cut yourself in half would be the intersection of your body, and every single person's crotch curve is as unique and beautiful as they are, but you can imagine how that creates complexities when we're trying to fit things. And then of course you also have to fit that to your leg. So I've provided a drafting your own trouser block masterclass, and then alongside that for my members and I've given them amendment fashion file packs, I've given them bespoke workshops. We also have a monthly designer diary diagnosis, where they ask me questions and I film tailored video responses to help them answer their questions and get them creatively unstuck. So you'll see me making my own amendments, and I'm shaving things off at like most 5mm at a time when it comes to doing trouser amendments, because the smallest changes really can make the biggest results. The tool you're going to see me using is a pattern master, and this is genuinely one of my most essential pattern cutting tools. I use it every single day. I also use mechanical pencils because the nib never blunts. You always have a sharp nib. I've got paper scissors and I've got fabric scissors. So these are the kind of tools you're going to see me using. And then I'm just making all my pattern amendments, making sure to notch them, label them. So you're going to see me getting started working with the fabric. I have a tiny little ironing board for a tiny little studio, but this fabric is a cotton chenille. It is so lightweight, which is another reason I'm kind of kicking myself when I'm down that I didn't stay stitch my waistline, because of something like this can really easily warp out of shape. But it's also the reason that I French seamed the entire garment, and so you'll see that my seam allowance is 1.5 centimeters for the purpose of French seaming, and I'm pinning only in the seam allowances. So make sure, especially if your pins can perforate your fabric, it is really important that you stick to the seam allowances so that when you come to construct, any holes that have damaged your textile cannot be seen when worn. Another thing I had to be really conscious of was my flamingo pattern placement. I didn't want any of these beautiful pink birds pecking anything. You can see a few memes online of like Winnie the Pooh in some compromising positions that people just haven't given thought to their print placement. So I definitely draped that on the stand, made sure that I cut out the front and back one at a time. And of course, if you are doing that and you're not cutting on the fold, make sure you flip your patterns so that you don't cut two of the same and you're actually cutting one pair. Another top tip when you're cutting your work out is making sure that the table actually carries the weight of the scissors. It's going to really help you get an accurate cut, especially if you are using scissors and not a rotary cutter. So the first thing I'm doing here is I'm actually sewing up my darts. That is going to provide shaping for the back. I am really happy with how these fit me on the rear. And then it's all about creating my front hip pockets. Everything was French seamed, meaning I had to sew it wrong sides together first, trim away the seam allowance. I would press that right sides together and sew another line of stitching again. That might sound a little bit complex, but basically all you're doing is 2 lines of stitching. The same kind of seam, you're just flipping it one way and then another. I do have a video floating around somewhere on the internet showing you how to do that. But it's a really nice technique to do when you're working with lightweight fabrics, especially translucent fabrics, because once you can see through the fabric, it's nice to have an enclosed tiny little seam. I'm then doing a single piece button fly front. These are my favorite to do. I find them a lot easier than zipped, and I just felt like a zip with such a lightweight fabric wasn't actually going to be as successful. And so I'm finishing my fly guard, I'm finishing my pieces on the overlocker here, and again over in the DP Alatilia I really break down all these techniques step by step. And so this was an amalgamation of basically everything I had taught my members over the past 4 to 6 weeks. I'm then attaching my fly front to the front of my trousers. I'm making sure that I leave an edge of it open so I can sandwich one of my trouser fronts between it, ensuring that all edges are really, really neat. A really good top tip for high-end fashion is basically to try and make the interior of your garment as beautiful as the exterior. That is how you know you're on the right track to luxury garments. You can see me top stitching over it. I actually, whenever I can, I try and use any thread that is already in my machine, or just try and come at it from a sustainable standpoint. So this garment has actually been made with a combination of light pink, neon pink and white threads, and I think it's actually quite successful in places. I had a lot of fun with the buttonholes in particular. So you can see me aligning my front trouser pieces here, measuring in my seam allowance and trimming into it before sandwiching my fly front. It's just making sure that everything lines up accordingly, and when you're working with tricky techniques like this, my top tips would be take your time. My top tips would be pin within the seam allowances, baste if possible, and absolutely press, press, press. Do not be afraid of an iron, because pressing at a machine can actually solve a multitude of sins. So you can just see me working this before I continue constructing the trouser legs. I'm sewing up my front crotch curve wrong sides together before creating a French seam by trimming away the excess, and then I will press that and fold it on itself and sew it right sides together, as you can see here. Having a textile that actually has a clear right and wrong side when you're doing enclosed seams does make it a lot easier. But again, just kind of step back and take a breath before you do any final line of stitching. I then, using my mum's old sewing machine, now an industrial sewing machine my industrial sewing machine can only do one type of stitch. It's called a lock stitch machine, meaning it just goes straight. So I always come back to use my mum's domestic to do my buttonholes. You can see me creating a sample and practicing on a scrap piece of fabric, making sure that the scrap piece of fabric is the same textile as my final garment. Otherwise, what's the point? You're not gonna get a realistic swatch. And then I'm using this button foot and going hell for leather. I really enjoy doing buttonholes. I've actually just covered a buttonholes and button workshop in the atelier, showing 3 different ways of doing buttonholes, because I know many of you out there struggle with machine sewed ones. For me, they come out fine, but I can appreciate that the more modern machine might be a little more complex. I'm then pinning my trouser legs together at the side seams, at the outer leg, wrong sides together as with the rest of this garment, stitching that down about 1 centimetre, trimming away my seam allowance to about 3 millimeters, pressing that, and then sewing again at 0.5 centimetre right sides together. That is going to give me a really beautiful enclosed seam. And it also strengthens the garment. When you're working with a lightweight fabric, having an enclosed seam, as you can see there, really strengthens the garment as well. My way of constructing trousers is I like to do the inseam as one continuous line. I know many people out there may prefer to sew up each of the trouser legs, tuck one trouser leg in the other and sew it that way. I mean, there aren't really any rules in fashion. You can do whatever way you like, but there's a lot of satisfaction to be had doing one continuous line of stitches. And I also find it definitely helps me match up the inseam to the crotch so that all my seams are in alignment and it just looks nice and professional. Now, technically, if you want to do it the professional way, you should always hem your trousers with your needle on the right side of your fabric. You'll see that I did that from the interior. That's just to make sure that you can see your stitching from the right side is always the tidiest. If you sew from the inside, obviously it's your bobbin thread that is seen from the right side of the fabric. But I've never really seen any issue with it. I'm then fusing my shaped waistband. I actually trim away my seam allowance from my iron-on interfacing just to reduce bulk. Another mistake I made here, and I'm always going to be honest with you with mistakes, they absolutely happen, whatever level of professionalism you're at, is I only interfaced one of the waistbands. I would have definitely, or I will definitely be going back and interfacing them both for that added structure. Trimming away the corners, removing all the bulk, and then you will see me clip and notch around the curves before pressing right sides out, and then I will be turning up one of the waistband edges by the seam allowance. I actually find these things really therapeutic. It's just, as I say, it's just so nice to get into deep work. So it's just a case of taking your time with waistbands, snipping into the curves, clipping and notching just to get that really clean line. And when you are using iron-on interfacing, where possible, try to use a dry hot iron because the steam can often lift the glue. Finally then, to attach the waistband, you're going to see me rolling up the seam allowance on one of the pieces along the bottom edge. I'm then pinning my waistband all around the opening of the trousers at the top, right sides together. Now, unlike the French seam, this is just going to be constructed as a normal waistband. There's no need to do wrong sides together for this. So it is right sides together. I'm pinning the edge of the waistband where I hadn't folded the seam allowance to the top of the trousers, the raw edge, and I'm just going to sew that all the way around, taking care Before folding the waistband down, I actually pushed my seam allowance up and into the waistband just so that everything is concealed. You're going to see me folding the waistband down, covering my line of stitches and pinning to conceal so that everything is as neat on the inside as it is on the out. Once you're happy with that, just stitch in the ditch to secure, which just means you're going to go over your exact line of stitching. And there we have it. Those were my flamingo trousers. Pretty straightforward to construct once you get started. There's only a few seam lines to go, which is why I may have rushed the job and need to revisit that waistband, but I was super happy with the fit. I definitely plan on making a matching blazer to go with it, and let me know if you did enjoy this video style, because although it wasn't a how-to, I hope you picked up a few tips and tricks along the way. Since doing the trouser framework, my members and I have moved on to our basic coat framework. This is the Vertigo coat. It's a toile, guys. It's a prototype. Don't panic. This isn't a final garment. Where again, we're designing, we're drafting to our measurements, and we are making up our designs at the machine. Really excited to bring this one out as a sewing pattern. The flamingo trousers, because there isn't much of a design element there, minus the choice in fabric, isn't going to become a sewing pattern, which is another reason I thought I would experiment with this style of video. But I hope that you picked up some tips. Let me know what you'd like to see from this account. I really am looking to nurture the channel this year and bring you more value, workshops, and support you on your own creative journey to building your dream wardrobe. I encourage you to come and have a little look at the DPL Atelier, see what's up for grabs, see what we do behind the closed doors, because I really can guarantee I can unleash your inner fashion designer and help you build your dream wardrobe, designed by you, made by you, and worn by you. I cannot wait to get out in my flamingo trousers come the warmer months. I will catch you on the flip side. Stay safe and keep creative.